I think that's a big problem with baseball, is just from a storyline content, it's just not there. But for the Nationals, Eric, it's a huge win for them. Again, coming off of what they did with Bryce Harper for that fan base, pretty nice gift to lose Harper and then turn around and win your first World Series. So, Eric, let's talk about football and specifically the NFC, because now we're starting here as some of these teams have gotten to their 8th game. Some teams haven't had a bye yet, but we're starting to see some separation in the NFC. So you've got San Francisco still undefeated. They'll play Thursday night against the Arizona Cardinals. Green Bay only has one loss. The Saints the same, just one loss with those three. They seem to be the top of the NFC. So who right now is the best team in the NFC, Eric?
That is probably one of the best questions in football right now, because the Saints, they got through a spell with Teddy Bridgewater. He went 5-0. Breeze comes back. They win yet another game. The team really looks solid. And to me, Justin, the team looks solid defensively too. And so when you have as much firepower as the Saints have, assuming that Kamara's healthy and Breeze is healthy and, they could keep Michael Thomas healthy throughout the season, this is a playoff contending team and probably with a deep playoff run. Then you would pit them up against saying, well, Green Bay right now is looking like a force. I mean, beginning of the year, even Aaron Rodgers was saying, well, our offense, we don't know. Our defense is playing great. And then the next game, their offense played better, but the defense gave up some. Now the Packers look really, really solid. I wouldn't say they look unbeatable, but no team in the NFL really looks unbeatable. The Packers are very good right now. So I am highly interested in those two teams, maybe even more so than the San Francisco 49ers. And that's not to say that the 49ers are playing bad. I mean, heck, they just once again hung up a bunch of points on a team. So I think that now that the 49ers have Coleman back and he seems to be really fitting in with Breda, and that running game is just really stout. You've got Kittle. Garoppolo is playing so much better than what we thought he would when he threw interceptions after interceptions after interceptions in the preseason. We weren't sure if that guy was going to complete a pass this year in the NFL, and yet he looks pretty good. Now they pick up Emmanuel Sanders, which, is he a great wide receiver? Probably not at this point in his career, but is he a piece for the 49ers? Yeah, absolutely. You can partner him with Goodwin and Kittle, and they have a little bit of an offensive attack there. The 49ers, though, are the ones I'm curious about because, as we said, they'll play Thursday night. They get a Cardinals team that's a little bit downtrodden. They did just pick up another running back to kind of spell the fact that David Johnson can't seem to not be injured lately. Kyler Murray hasn't figured everything out. So I think the 49ers go ahead and get a win again on Thursday night, go to 8-0. But then their schedule gets much tougher, including games against these better teams. So, Justin, that's where my head's at. I think the Saints and the Packers probably are better teams than the 49ers. But once they start playing each other here later in the season, we're going to get that all figured out. And I'm glad you didn't bring up the NFC East, because my Eagles, the Cowboys, that division's a bit of a mess right now. And I just don't know what you're going to get out of those teams. I know you'll bring up the Eagles here in a minute, so we'll talk about them. But to me, Green Bay and the Saints are probably the head of the class at this point.
Well, I can't talk about the NFC East because no one's significantly over 500. And I know Dallas is 4-3, but they just had a 3-game losing streak, including a loss to the Jets. So they just don't fit into this conversation right now. Maybe they will in a few weeks. But I think the most interesting thing about the three teams that we talked about is all of them are or have been dealing with significant injuries. You look at San Francisco with what's going on with their offensive line. McGlinchey's been out. Staley's been out. Juszczyk got hurt in that Monday night game. Those are key pieces to what they want to do with running the football. And then they just get Sanders added into the mix because wide receiver was the one position they were probably the most vulnerable at in terms of their skill positions. They have like 8 running backs that all seem to be able to get yardage and touchdowns for them whenever they just seem to be able to just plug guys in and they have success. So I think they're interesting from that standpoint. Green Bay hasn't had Devontae Adams really since second week of the season. He's been out. So that's Rodgers' guy, and he's been able to kind of piecemeal it together. And then the Saints have been without Breeze until last week, and they figured out a way to win, which shows they have a lot of depth on that team. So I think right now, specifically for Green Bay and for New Orleans, it's going to come down to who gets the number 1 seed out of those two teams because home field advantage will be such a big difference. San Francisco, if they happen to get it, outside of getting maybe rain, the weather will probably not be that bad. California, I mean, unless there's a wildfire or something, but outside of that, the weather probably wouldn't be a huge issue. You have to send the Saints to Green Bay in the middle of late December, early January for a playoff game, middle of January. That's going to be tough for New Orleans. Same if you send Green Bay into the Dome. I think that's where now this is going to be something to watch, is who can kind of pull away. Because if these two teams stay locked together, I still feel like they're going to catapult over the Niners. I still haven't felt like, from watching their schedule and who they've played, that they've really been tested. Their defense is good enough when they come up against the Kyle Allen, they're going to crush him. And that's exactly what they did last Sunday. He doesn't have the experience to play that defense. That defense is maybe the best in the league. Definitely top three if you're looking at it versus New England. But to your point, they get the Cardinals, then they get the Seahawks, they get the Cardinals again, then it's Packers, Ravens, Saints. So they're going to get tested, and that being the 49ers. They're going to finally play some teams, and those games are going to change the balance of how the NFC playoff picture looks. So in 5 weeks, 6 weeks from now, these teams are going to be separation there. And then it's going to be who has one of those Sundays where they lose a game they shouldn't and they completely screw up their chances in the playoffs, because that's what we see happens a lot. Teams that look really good and they have an inside track to the one seed and they end up losing a game that they shouldn't. For these teams, because of the disparity in the weather and the stadiums between Green Bay and New Orleans, that could be the difference in who gets to the Super Bowl. And then we don't know who also is coming, because, Eric, the Vikings are playing really good football right now. And they're another team where Thielen's banged up right now. He didn't play. They didn't look great Thursday night against Washington, but it's a short week. Nobody's really looked that spectacular on Thursday. It'll just be, can Cousins figure this thing out? Can he continue to play this way? Because they've got primetime games coming up, and that's where Cousins has really struggled. So is there any chance if Green Bay slips up, they'll have another one versus the Vikings where they'll go to Minnesota? Any chance the Vikings could jump in and win the NFC North, or are you sticking with the Packers at this point?
I'd probably stick with the Packers at this point, but the Vikings are interesting.
Cousins' history doesn't give you a lot of confidence.
And that's kind of where, and that's kind of where I was going with this, is that you look at what the Vikings have done in the past couple weeks, but I think if you really break it down, there still are some concerns there, because they're doing it all with Stephon Diggs, who's basically just getting the rock constantly fed to him due to the fact that he complained for the first 3 or 4 weeks. And now it seems like their offensive plan, and why Cousins looks so good now, is like, well, I'll just make sure Diggs gets 140 yards and we'll score a bunch of points. There's concerns there, though. As you said, Thielen is really been out for the last couple of games. That's led to Diggs being the only guy. But Kyle Rudolph has almost been invisible this year, and he's been a good tight end in the past couple of years. So even in a stretch where Thielen is ineffective or out, there's been nothing going to Rudolph. And then their main guy, Dalvin Cook, is out of the backfield doing an amazing job this year. So I think they're really dependent on two guys, Stephon Diggs and Dalvin Cook. And Kirk Cousins is just benefiting from the fact that Diggs wants the rock to him constantly, and it's working out. Well, if that doesn't work and it breaks down and teams double cover Diggs, or this starts to get more difficult later in the year, I don't think that's a recipe that works continually. Dalvin Cook's going to continue to get banged up like any running back in the league, so nothing against him. I think he's having a phenomenal season, but there's always something that could go wrong there, ankle sprain, whatever. And I think that's a huge risk for them. In other words, they're not diversified. Their portfolio of offensive weapons is just not diversified enough. They've got superstars, but if anything happens there, that's what would lead me to believe that when you look at a team like the Green Bay Packers, who, as you said, are doing this without Devontae Adams in the lineup and that kind of thing. You know, Williams has been out with a concussion out of the backfield, and Aaron Jones has stepped up and done phenomenal. When they get those guys back, they just get better. They're not going to get worse. So to me, I think the Packers still hold the edge there. But out of that division, you know, with Trubisky doing what he's doing with the Bears and everything, out of that division, it's definitely the Packers and then the Vikings.
You bring up Trubisky, and I think The Niners remind me a little bit of the Bears.
I heard you sigh there. That's probably the perfect reaction.
I trust Garoppolo more than I ever did Trubisky last year. And then I think the Niners defense is playing just as well as Chicago did last year. And then I think they have a quarterback in a run game that's better than what the Bears offered. So that's why I don't discount the 49ers and their chances. I just want to see them play some good teams. But the Bears, Eric, and look, we talked about this in the preview, that as good as Chicago did last year, Vegas had downgraded them to their 9 wins was where they set their over-under, and it was pretty close in terms of the spread, in terms of how much money you got for betting over or under. It wasn't like it was way over, whether 9 over was minus 200 or something like that. There wasn't a lot of confidence in this Bears team. I've never had confidence in Trubisky. I thought they did a lot of smoke and mirrors with him last year, and the defense bailed them out a lot. And now, Eric, it's all coming to a head because at some point this team's going to have to make a decision on what to do with Mitchell Trubisky. And then when you see the way that Deshaun Watson is playing, the way Patrick Mahomes has played, and then you watch Mitchell Trubisky and he went before those guys, what in the world do the Bears do with Trubisky at this point?
That's a great question, because I think they're at a point where they're seeing a lot of regression out of this guy. I mean, I was getting higher on him in his sophomore year last year with what the Bears did, and what it just looked like he was making good strides for that offense. It seems the opposite this year. I mean,
he's awful.
Yeah. And I sighed a little bit myself, thinking, do I say that? Do I say how this guy is just?
Yes, just say it.
Okay.
Just for Chicago Bear fans, just say it. He is awful.
Okay.
I'll say it for the both of us. He's terrible, Eric. And you brought the point up the first game of the season that Trubisky could have a running back standing 5 yards from him, or Allen Robinson 45 yards down the field, and he throws the ball at the exact same pace.
Yeah.
That's his game. And I think he doesn't seem to be able to read defenses. He makes poor decisions. And then Matt Nagy is not putting him in good positions either. Like, what are you doing at the end of the game? Putting your kicker on the wrong hash. You could have run another play and tried to get him closer. And then he misses the field goal. So even against bad teams, Eric, they suck. And
yeah,
Trubisky
that was really
sucks.
telling last week against the Chargers. And I thought, the Chargers, are they going to lose another game with some weird outcome? And it ended up being that they won a game with a weird outcome because Chicago had no confidence in their running back or quarterback to run a couple more plays with 40 seconds left to get the ball either closer or to the center of the field to make it easier on their kicker, who ended up missing it anyway. And they lose like that. So it perfectly, appropriate that happened in a game against the Chargers. But either way, that told me everything I needed to know about the way the coaching staff even feels about Trubisky and their offense, because they were willing to look, any NFL team with 40 seconds left on the clock, that's like 2 or 3 plays to any team in this league, except apparently the Bears, who said, well, we'll just leave it here on this hash, give our kicker, a weird angle and a chance, and he missed it. Because you have no confidence in your offense at all. Trubisky's QBR average for the year is 35. I mean, this guy is not good. He has barely over 1,000 passing yards. It's really hurting Chicago at this point, who last year looked like they were an up-and-coming team, and now this year they're in the basement. I mean, they're in last place in that division behind Detroit, and the fact is they're going to lose more games here, hopefully this coming week against the Eagles. So I don't know, Justin. I think they've got a big decision to make about Trubisky, and the trade deadline has passed. So now, trying to make a move for some of these other teams. I mean, could they have gotten Rosen off the Dolphins? I don't know. Could they have done something where they maybe moved Trubisky around and had an opportunity? But that time has passed now, and now they're kind of all in on him. And like you said, to look at who was drafted behind Trubisky in that draft, it gets a little bit crazy. You're almost talking about, the Bowie situation in the NBA with Jordan. It's like, yikes.
Well, the thing about him is you don't see progression in terms of getting better. Like you said, last year, he's probably regressed more, but even last year, I just felt like he got bailed out a lot or put in advantageous positions because of the defense. And they had a pretty good 2-headed monster with Jordan Howard and Cohen. And this year, even in the first game, we talked about the fact that Nagy went away from the run, and it wasn't like it wasn't working. and it wasn't like it was a 3 or 4 possession game. So maybe all this isn't on Trubisky, that this is, or maybe they're trying to cover up for him. I don't know what they're trying to do. They dink and dunk way